Depression isn't the enemy. I know it seems like it is, but it isn't. Depression is there for a very good reason. It has a purpose. And once we know what that purpose is, that opens a doorway through which we're able to use that depression to finally end that depression. That's what we're going to look at in this lesson. All right, so depression isn't the enemy. Depression has a purpose. Remember earlier, if you've seen all of the other videos leading up to this one, if you haven't, make sure you look them up. Remember when we did this little demonstration here with our flame? And what we were saying was that this flame is the perfect expression for everything that was brought together. We brought together this heat source, there's a fuel source here, there's air all around us. And when you bring this combination together, you get a flame every single time. Depression is exactly like that. When you bring these conditions together, these particular conditions, you get depression, unhappiness, sadness every single time. Life never gets it wrong. There's a very good reason for this feeling, this dark feeling, this sad feeling, this feeling of depression. Now that's important to realize because just like fear, depression has been vilified simply because of the feeling. And I know what the feeling is. I know how awful the feeling is. But the reason that it stays with us, that it makes these return visits, is that we don't really understand its purpose. We don't really understand what it's to be used for. And so, of course, it returns. It returns because each time it does return, the only thing we know is what we've been taught by the world, which is I have to do something to distract myself from this. I have to push this away. We even begin to look over our shoulder to see, oh no, is it coming again? Our entire relationship with depression is one where we're not able to learn the purpose of it, the reason it's there. And so we're kept entirely outside of the lessons that it has to teach us. So this depression, what is it? What's its purpose? Well, for lack of a better set of words, you can say depression is a warning system. It's warning us that we are starving for meaning. And that system is designed to help us reconnect to where real meaning is found. That's what it's supposed to do. Now, like I said, in this world, there are very few people who understand this, and so they don't know what it's to be used for, and certainly can't help somebody else figure out how to use it correctly. And so the best you get are, well, here's a way for you to have a few less bad days. Don't ever settle for a few less bad days. You can get straight to the root of this thing and understand what it's really founded upon and watch it as it dissolves away. So, I'm starving for meaning. Remember this illustration from an earlier discussion? Depression is warning me that my way of living is devoid of real meaning. Remember, we use this diagram to say that there is something within us that uses each moment of our life and it does something with it. And what we were saying was that this way of experiencing our life misuses the moments of our life. And we're going to get into that in future videos. But it misuses what happens in our moment-to-moment life. And as a result, there's this byproduct that's being created, this gradual buildup of unhappiness. Now, there's something that's important to realize about this warning system. See, the warning system isn't letting you know that you might be wounded if something were to happen. The warning system is letting you know you've already been wounded. You know, if we take something like fear, so the fear of public speaking, I've got a video for this. The fear of public speaking. You know, if you've ever had this fear, ever wrestled with it, you stand off stage or you're seated there about to be called up to speak to the group, and it feels like the fear is warning you that you may be hurt here. There's a chance you're going to be wounded. There's a chance you're going to be hurt by what happens. No, the very presence of that fear is letting you know you've already been wounded. No matter what happens when you get up to the microphone, you've already been wounded. There's something in you that's terrified of what those facial expressions might be, depending on whether your voice cracks as you're talking, depending on whether there's a shake in your hand as you speak, which then perpetuates the shaking of the hand. It becomes this snowball effect. But this fear isn't letting you know that you might be wounded. It's letting you know that you have been wounded. That something is misusing these moments of our lives. So that's an important change, because we normally, when we feel this fear, we tend to use it as an alert system that we now have to take evasive action, that we have to protect ourselves so that we can avoid being wounded. Well, this understanding that we're talking about now says, too late for that. The wound has already happened. Now I have to get interested in what's been wounded. See, that's an entirely different action than I have to protect myself. I have to find a way to get myself out of this moment so that these people don't see this fear, so that I don't get hurt and wounded, my reputation doesn't get wounded. So then, how do we go about investigating this depression? How do we go about using this depression or any of these internal feelings, whether it's fear, anxiety? How do we use them to dissolve them? Well, let's take a lesson from a mechanic. So a mechanic, you take your car in and you say, there's this weird knocking noise coming from the engine. I have no idea what it is. And you tell him or her, it's when I accelerate, or the conditions, only when I'm going 60 miles an hour or faster, I hear the knock. Well, imagine if the mechanic then took the car back to the shop and she began replacing the taillights, and she began just replacing parts. That's not what she does. She doesn't attack the problem by just replacing, by trying to change, by trying to push out the condition, whatever it is. She begins to investigate. He begins to look deeper into the problem, gets as close to it as they can, learns everything they can about the problem itself. They don't care one bit about how it's going to be fixed. Their whole concern is, I need to understand what this problem is, what makes it, where it's coming from. And they're going to let the problem lead the way. They're going to let the problem teach them everything they need to know about what is needed to make the car whole again, to fix this defect. So this is where it becomes quite hopeful, because it means that the real solution, the real hope, is in what you are now. The real hope is in the depression itself. If you've ever heard the phrase that the answer is in the problem, the answer is in the question, the solution to the depression is in the depression, not away from it. The hope isn't in some other thing that you aren't right now, that you hope to become. That's not the real hope. That's where people put their hope, and that's why nothing changes. How can what you aren't right now, this thing that you imagine you're going to be sometime in the future, what power does that have to change anything about what you are right now? It has none. But wouldn't you say that for the last 5 years, 10, 15, 20, 40 years, the default response internally that we've learned from everybody is, okay, you have this weakness. You want to try to make yourself strong. You want to try to command that audience through whatever techniques they tell you. Imagine everybody out there in their underwear. Repeat to yourself, I'm a strong, confident person. You know, when you sit and repeat affirmations like that, you're building contradictions inside your own consciousness, because that's not what you are. You're not a strong, confident person. And by the way, and this will sound like a weird, mysterious riddle initially, you're also not a weak, scared person. We'll eventually come to that as we go along. You're neither one of those things. You're a very special kind of ground where these relationships, remember the fire, the little flame? When you bring together just the right ingredients, you get that flame. You're the ground where certain ingredients, certain influences are brought together and they produce reliably every single time depression, joy, meaning, contentment. The real hope is in what you are now. Think about this. Right now, you are a complete course in how to make depression, or whatever the condition is you might be struggling with. You are a complete course in how to make heartbreak, heartache. You're a complete course in how to make stress or anxiety. What I mean by that is, if those conditions, if those feelings are manifesting within you on a regular basis, well, there you have it. You're the place where certain ingredients are mixed together perfectly to make depression. Well, guess what that means? That means you are also, at the exact same time, a perfect course in how to dissolve depression. Because if you're understanding how to make depression, aren't you also understanding how to dissolve it? If you're understanding how to make fire, the components that are part of this flame, don't you inherently, as you understand what makes this flame burn, aren't you inherently then understanding how to extinguish that flame? It's all in one thing. The problem has all of the answers in it. The depression has in it all of the knowledge of what it is that makes depression and all of the knowledge of what it takes to dismantle depression, to dissolve it. I want to underscore the idea. The great hope is in what you are right now, whatever it is you're facing. It has all the answers in it. See how this changes your relationship with this internal condition. Are you going to push away now the very thing that has answers in it? And doesn't it make sense that I would go 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? I'm thinking of my wife. Battled this condition, this condition of depression for 28, 30 some years, 35 years. Because we're raised in this world that only knows to push away the condition and hope somehow I'll find a way to push it out of me once and for all without ever understanding it. So now, I hope there's a sigh of relief within you. Of course it's been futile up to this point. Of course. Now, don't worry if you have made some efforts to try to understand it and didn't get very far. That's okay. The actual wisdom, the knowledge that dissolves this depression permanently, it's really the all-inclusive understanding of what our lives really are. And that's not something that you pull out of one paragraph of a book. It takes some work to understand it. So I hope after this little discussion, you walk away from this with maybe a sense of relief, a sense that everything is in perfect order, a sense that I'm beginning to feel that I know exactly why I haven't made much progress, why I haven't been able to escape this condition. This explains it perfectly. Now I know, just like that mechanic has to get closer to the problem, I need to get closer to this depression. Now, don't worry. Don't let that scare you. When I say we're going to get closer to the depression, I mean we're going to go into the understanding of what makes it, what generates it. That's getting closer to it. We're not going to push it away. We're not going to find some tricks so that we have a few less bad days. We're going to go to the heart of this thing. So coming up next, I'm going to look at the actual roadmap that I used to cure this really what I would call suicidal depression. I mean, it's the depression that you would never wish upon any person. You wouldn't wish it upon your enemy. And those of you who are standing in this place, you know what I'm talking about. You would never wish this feeling upon anybody. We're going to look at what the path was that I stumbled through because nobody had really laid out a path. We're going to look at what's the path once it gets organized into a step-by-step framework. We're going to look at that in the next talk. Now remember, this talk is part of a greater course. So be sure you find the playlist here and go to the beginning. And it's important that you start from the beginning and step all the way through, because this understanding is going to be building one talk upon another. If you dive in the middle, yeah, you'll get some of it, but you'll miss the benefit of all the groundwork we laid. So that's one thing. If you can't find the playlist here, you can head over to theinneroasis.com. You can find the course, the complete course there. Also, I want to remind you, we've got our weekly discussion group. I can't tell you how valuable these are, because when we show up at these discussions, we show up with questions. We show up to share insights. We share, here are the things that we're struggling with. We do meditations. We do internal exercises. And I'm always amazed at the rooms in the kingdom, this internal kingdom, this internal mansion that get unlocked during these discussions. Can't tell you how important they are. So these are weekly. You can find out more about them. I'll put the link up here on the... Here we go. So you can head over to theinneroasis.com/connect to get signed up for those discussion groups. Those are free. And let's see, the last thing. Well, one other thing. If you know anybody who is going through this same condition, I know people tend to have their support groups. People who are struggling with a similar kind of situation. feel free to invite them to the discussion groups, invite them to check out this course. There's a lot of people struggling with these kinds of things right now, and there isn't a lot of help out there that can guide somebody from the beginning of this condition to the dissolution of it. So please do share it with friends. Also, if you found this video helpful, please like it, please subscribe. This helps the algorithm get this video in front of other people. All right, we'll see you in the next video.